The heavy sound of the front door clicked shut behind me, signaling the end of another exhausting day. I kicked off my heels, the familiar weight of them sliding off with relief. Home. My sanctuary, or so it once was. My name is Sera Caldwell, but everyone calls me Sera. I'm 28 years old, a financial consultant, sharp with numbers and even sharper with people. I've learned to be this way, strong, self-reliant, ever since I lost my mother. She was my rock, my safe place, and when she passed away, I thought nothing could break me. But then came Victor. Victor Caldwell, my stepfather. He entered our lives like a whirlwind, sweeping my mother off her feet, and slowly everything started changing. At first, I thought it was just another man in her life, but Victor, with his charming smile and smooth talk, quickly found his way into my world. Little did I know then that he would take more than just my mother. He would take my childhood, my home, and eventually my voice. But it wasn't just Victor. It was Melanie, my mother's replacement, who quickly stepped into her role. As much as Victor was a stranger, Melanie's presence felt suffocating. They made their decisions, ran their lives, and I was just supposed to follow along quietly, always second. I had never questioned it until now. I dropped my bag onto the hallway table and walked toward the kitchen, the familiar scent of roasted chicken lingering in the air. Melanie was in the living room with Victor, the two of them speaking in hushed tones, as they always did, plotting their next move like some kind of corporate power couple. I poured myself a glass of water, the coldness of it rushing down my throat, but there was nothing that could chill the bubbling anger inside me. The tension had been rising for months. Little things at first, a suggestion here, a comment there. But it wasn't until tonight that everything would come to a head. "Serafina, we need to talk," Victor's voice broke through the silence, carrying into the kitchen. I froze, glass still in hand. I hated the way he said my name. It was never warm, never fatherly. It always felt like an accusation. I walked into the living room, trying to mask my exhaustion. "What's going on?" I asked, forcing a neutral tone, even though inside my body was already bracing for impact. Victor sat back on the leather couch, his posture too comfortable, as if he was about to deliver news of a business deal. "I think it's time you start contributing more to this household," he said, his voice casual. "I've been thinking about it, and given that you're financially stable now, it's only fair that you start paying rent." My heart stopped. Rent. He wanted me to pay rent. I stared at him, trying to process what I had just heard. "Excuse me." "You're 28 now, Serafina," Victor continued, his tone unwavering. "You have a job. You're successful. You can afford it. I think $900 a month would be fair." $900. The words hung in the air like a thick fog, and I found it hard to breathe. This house, the one my grandparents had left to me, was mine, and yet here was Victor, sitting there so comfortably, expecting me to pay for the privilege of living in my own home. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My mind was racing, memories flashing back in a blur. All those years of being treated like an outsider in my own family, all the ways they had controlled me without my realizing it. Was this their final play? Was this how they would try to take everything from me? I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my face flushing with a mix of anger and betrayal. I had tolerated their manipulations for far too long, and now this? I stood frozen in place, my fingers gripping the edge of the countertop as I tried to calm my shaking hands. "I don't need to explain myself, Sera," Victor continued, his eyes flicking over to Melanie, who was sitting silently beside him. "It's just the way things are. You're an adult now. You need to start pulling your weight." "Pulling my weight." I finally found my voice, and it came out sharp, more cutting than I intended. "You've been pulling my weight for years, Victor. Don't you dare sit there and tell me what I need to do." Melanie finally spoke up, her voice smooth and practiced. "Victor is right. We all have to contribute, and you've been lucky. This isn't a free ride anymore, Sera." I turned toward her, meeting her eyes for the first time in what felt like forever. There was a look of superiority in her eyes, like she was some kind of gatekeeper to the life I had once known. She didn't understand. She never would. I swallowed, the lump in my throat threatening to suffocate me. "I've been paying for this house, every single bill, since I was 18. I snapped, the words coming out before I could stop them. "I'm the one who keeps this family afloat, while you two just sit back and enjoy the ride." Victor's eyes narrowed, and Melanie crossed her arms, but neither of them backed down. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't stand there any longer. "I need some air," I muttered, turning on my heel and walking out of the room, the sharp sound of my footsteps echoing through the house. I walked out onto the balcony, the cool night air hitting my face as I leaned against the railing. I had to figure this out. There was no way I was paying rent. No way I was going to let them control me like this. But I needed to know more. I needed to understand what was really going on. The next few hours passed in a blur, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. How had it come to this? How had I allowed myself to be manipulated for so long? But one thing was clear. The time for silence was over. I had been playing their game, but it was time to take control of my own life. And the first step? I needed to find out exactly what I was dealing with. I needed answers. I stood up, my resolve hardening. This was far from over. The moment I closed the door to my bedroom that night, I knew everything had changed. The house felt different, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I had learned that my grandparents' mansion was legally mine. The power was now in my hands, and for the first time in years, I felt the heavy weight of control settle into my chest. But that weight wasn't just a sense of power. It was mixed with something else, fear. Fear of what I was about to do. The idea of taking legal action against my own family, against the people I grew up with, was a bitter pill to swallow. But it was time. It was time to fight for what was rightfully mine. Time to confront them head-on. I pulled out my laptop and began searching for a lawyer. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant, but they moved anyway. I had spent too many years trying to keep the peace, pretending that everything was fine. But tonight I was done. I couldn't just sit by and let them manipulate me any longer. The phone rang just as I finished drafting an email. It was my lawyer. I had been expecting this call for hours. My heart thudded in my chest as I answered, barely able to get the words out. "We've got everything we need," he said, his voice calm and steady. "The documents are ready. We'll start the eviction process tomorrow." Tomorrow. I could hardly believe it. It felt like I had spent my whole life waiting for this moment. But now that it was here, it didn't feel as victorious as I thought it would. It felt like a war had just begun. The next morning, I walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. But as the hours dragged on, the weight of the decision I had made settled in. What if I was wrong? What if this was a mistake? I wasn't sure anymore, but I couldn't go back. Not now. That evening, when I returned home, things were as they always had been. Victor and Melanie were on the couch, talking in hushed voices as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I walked into the living room and stood in front of them, my heart racing. "I've spoken to a lawyer," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I've started the eviction process. You need to leave. Now." The room went silent. The air felt thick with tension. Victor's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. "Sera, don't be ridiculous," he said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. "You don't know what you're doing." "No," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I know exactly what I'm doing. This house is mine. I'm not going to let you or Melanie take it from me." Melanie stood up, her face twisting into a mask of feigned hurt. "How can you do this, Sera?" she asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "We're family. This isn't about money. It's about keeping the family together." Her words felt like a slap in the face. How could she stand there and say that after everything they had done? I had been nothing but a servant in my own home. And now, they wanted to play the family card? "You don't get to play that card anymore," I said, my anger bubbling to the surface. I'm done with being your doormat. I'm done with the lies, the manipulation, and the control. Victor's eyes flashed with something I couldn't place. Anger, but also fear. Fear that I was serious. That this wasn't just some tantrum, but a real fight for what was mine. Don't do this, Sera, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You'll regret it. I've already regretted enough, I said, turning on my heel and walking away. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I could feel the weight of their gazes on my back as I retreated to my room. I had taken the first step in a battle that would change everything. And as much as I wanted to pretend that everything was going to be okay, deep down, I knew this wasn't going to end quietly. The next day, the legal papers were filed. Every formality was checked, every document signed. I couldn't believe how quickly everything was moving. It was real. The eviction was happening. My family was going to be forced out of my home, and there was nothing they could do about it. But, of course, they weren't just going to take this lying down. I knew that. I had no illusions about how this would go. Victor would fight me tooth and nail. Melanie would cry crocodile tears and try to guilt-trip me into backing down. And Jasper and Olivia, they would side with their parents, even though I was the one who had always been there for them. At dinner that night, I could feel the shift in the room. The tension was palpable. Melanie and Victor sat at the head of the table, their eyes constantly darting toward me. Jasper and Olivia, as expected, were on their side. I was the outsider, now the enemy. Sera, Melanie began, her tone sugary sweet. We don't want things to get ugly. You're part of this family. You don't have to do this. I looked at her, my gaze unwavering. You don't get to tell me what I have to do anymore, I said, my voice calm but filled with resolve. Victor's hand slammed down on the table, his face turning red. You'll regret this, Sera. You're throwing away everything we've built. What we've built? I asked, my voice rising. You've built your life off of manipulation and lies. You're not getting away with it anymore. The room went silent, but the tension didn't go away. It was thick in the air, suffocating. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I made my decision. This was it. There was no turning back. The legal battle had begun. The moment I stepped into the living room, I knew it was coming. The final confrontation. For weeks now, everything had been building up to this. The papers had been filed, the lawyers had done their work, and I was moments away from a victory that should have felt sweet, but instead tasted bitter. The mansion was mine, legally at least, but the emotional price of it was too high. I'd spent the last few days organizing my thoughts, gathering my strength. The legal victory was near, but so was the battle for my soul. The moment I'd been dreading, confronting my stepfather, Victor, was just around the corner. The last time we had spoken, he had tried to downplay everything, pretending that his demands were perfectly reasonable. But I wasn't that scared girl anymore. I wasn't going to let him gaslight me or manipulate me into backing down. I stood there in the doorway, watching Victor and Melanie on the couch, the two people who had tried to break me down for so long. Victor's eyes met mine with a hardness I hadn't seen before. Melanie was looking at me, but her expression wasn't one of worry or fear. It was one of defiance. She thought she could win this, that her charm and manipulation would work. But this time it was different. I wasn't backing down. Sera, we need to talk, Victor said, his voice surprisingly calm, considering the situation. He still thought he could talk his way out of this. This is madness. You can't really be doing this. You can't just throw us out. You're right, I said, stepping forward, my voice steady and clear. This isn't just about throwing you out. It's about finally taking control of my life. I've spent years letting you manipulate me, but no more. Victor's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake. You think you're going to get away with this? Do you really want to destroy this family? Family. I laughed bitterly. What family? The one that's been using me as their personal servant, their personal piggy bank? That family. Melanie's lips tightened, but she didn't say anything. I wasn't sure whether she was angry or if she was calculating her next move. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. I had the upper hand. I've been quiet for too long, I continued, my voice rising. But no more. You've made your last move. You've pushed me too far. Victor stood up, his hand slamming down on the table. You don't understand what you're doing. I'll make sure you regret this. You'll lose everything. I felt the familiar knot of anxiety twist in my stomach, but I didn't show it. I couldn't afford to. I'm done being afraid of you, Victor. I'm done letting you control me. You're the one who's going to lose everything, because I'm not backing down. Not now. Not ever. His face contorted in anger, and for a moment I thought he might lash out. But instead he turned away, muttering under his breath, You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Sera. You've been making mistakes your whole life. I shot back, my words sharp. I'm just the one who's finally calling you out. I didn't expect Victor to back down, and he didn't. But something had shifted. He could see it in my eyes. This wasn't a fight he was going to win. Not anymore. The next few days were a blur of legal motions, emails, and phone calls. My lawyer kept me updated on the progress, but I knew there would be one last showdown, one last battle to face. Victor wasn't going to let go of the mansion without a fight. I knew that, but I also knew that there was no going back. The battle for my home, my autonomy, was about to reach its peak. At the dinner table that evening, the tension was palpable. Victor, Melanie, and my half-siblings, Jasper and Olivia, all sat across from me, their eyes wary. They knew that this was no longer just a legal battle. It was personal. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of them. I wasn't afraid of losing them, even though I knew that's exactly what would happen. Sera, Melanie began, her voice smooth and calculated. This isn't the way to handle things. You're tearing this family apart. Don't you see that? I leaned back in my chair, meeting her gaze without hesitation. You're right, Melanie. I am tearing this family apart, but not in the way you think. I'm not the one who's been manipulating everyone. You and Victor did that, and now it's over. Stop it, Sera, Jasper interrupted, his voice filled with annoyance. You're making a huge mistake. Do you really think this is going to end well for you? You're throwing everything away. Our family is falling apart because of you. I stared at him, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You're right about one thing, Jasper. The family is falling apart. But it's not because of me. It's because of you and Victor and Melanie. You've been living off my sacrifices, and now you're angry that I'm not going to let you do it anymore. Olivia, who had been quiet the entire time, suddenly piped up. This is so embarrassing, she said, rolling her eyes. You're making a scene. Everyone's going to know about this. What's going to happen to us? We'll be a laughingstock. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was worried about her social media persona while the family was disintegrating in front of her eyes. I couldn't help but feel a mix of pity and disgust. Victor slammed his fist on the table again. Enough! You don't know what you're doing, Sera. I've made mistakes, but I'm still your father. Then act like it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But you're not going to manipulate me anymore. I'm done. The table fell silent. I could feel the eyes of everyone on me, but this time it didn't matter. I had made my decision. I had fought for my life, for my freedom, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me now. As the eviction date approached, I felt a sense of unease settle over me. I was winning, but at what cost? My family was falling apart, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had sacrificed too much in the process. Would I be able to live with this, knowing that I had destroyed the family I had once tried so hard to hold together? The final battle was coming, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it.